Let's be honest. Nobody likes feeling their feelings, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And what we're going to be diving into in this episode is how to do it intelligently, how to do it appropriately, and how to not want to puke in your mouth every time you do go to do it.
If you're not feeling your feelings, let's just say you are a wrecking ball walking through life. So don't be that gal, don't be that guy. Create a little bit of space for those feels.
Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Amelia for $4.91 How to Create Space for Your Feelings. Very similarly to our last episode that we did, this one's going to be a little bit of a hot tempo, but we're going to make sure that by the end of this episode, you are walking away, scrolling away with, clicking away with a little bit of a strategy, game plan, in order for you as a human being, which, by the way, you're a sentient being, meaning you feel, to process those emotions and actually create space for feeling your feelings. And you might be like, well, why? That kind of sounds stupid. Why do we need to create space for our feelings? Like I said at the very beginning, if you're not doing so, you are walking through life like a wrecking ball, meaning that your feelings, your emotions are like, it's like a wet dog that's just rolled around on mud. You're just shaking them off on everyone else. And trust me, no one enjoys when someone is doing that. So let's get into it.
Definitely not. I guess let's start there. Why do we need to feel them? So like, what are the function that feelings serve that make it so important that we need to feel them? What do they do? Why are they there? Are they just these things that only weak people have because they can't get their ish together? Like, what's the truth?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to quote something from a book that I'm reading right now, and it's Brene Brown's book, Strong Ground. I really appreciate her work. And I'm at the chapter, I don't know what chapter, but it's the chapter where she's talking about how I used to pathologize sadness and anguish, or maybe sadness and disappointment or something. It was sadness and some other emotion. And this really resonated with me, and I'll use this to really help us understand this. But I used to pathologize sadness and, let's just say, anger, right? Meaning, if I experience these emotions, then there must be something wrong with me. And I can definitely identify with that. And so to answer the question, we as human beings have gotten it so wrong about why do we feel? Why do emotions matter? Why do our feelings matter? Why are they important? What are they? What functions, to your question, Bianca, do they serve? And what Brene was saying in her works that I'll also echo and endorse is the fact that emotions, feelings, which I'm sure we'll get into what the actual mechanics of a feeling is, it is to really help us understand and experience the full spectrum of what it means to be human. In other words, if you are not feeling your feelings, you are not processing the world effectively. You are not experiencing your world as a sentient human being. Now, don't get me started on how accurate our appraisals of the world are, or how quote unquote accurate our emotions are for a specific situation. But in a nutshell, I believe that the best way I guess I can put it is, emotions and feelings are there for us to witness what it means to be human. And that's really what it comes down to. Other than that, I like to tell clients they're signals to what we value, signals to what we care about, signals to what we don't like, right? Disgust is a great example for that. A feeling of disgust is a evolutionarily big signal of a warning sign, right? That something maybe isn't for you, or someone is not going to be worth your time. So I do look at feelings just very similarly to like how I look at emotions, which is they're a trailhead, very similarly to what Richard Schwartz says in his work with IFS. It's a trailhead, it's a signal, it's a data point. And so whatever one of those, I think that will get us started with why they matter, or at least what they are.
In a nutshell, emotions are meaning. They help us understand what our experience of something is before we necessarily have words to put to it. It's why we'll typically notice a feeling before we notice what something means to us or our interpretation of it. So it's a signal. It helps guide our behavior. It helps guide decision making. It organizes our experiences. They're messages. Now, the problem with that, not the problem with the message, but the problem when you're consistently suppressing the message, is that our brain, when we're suppressing that information, our brain goes, oh, okay, we're going to store this for later. Oh, okay, they're not in a space to actually like encode this right now. Cool. We're going to put this over here. And what we're going to do is when we think they're ready, or maybe if something is going on and we're like, ooh, this is a good opportunity to bring this back up, the brain goes, hey, remember that thing? Here it is again. Here it is again. Here it is again. Because when we're suppressing these feelings, our brain thinks that this is unprocessed, unfinished information that we're going to come back to. Yeah. That's why people end up with like intrusive thoughts, intrusive memories, intrusive feelings. They're like, this ended 6 years ago. Why do I still have these negative feelings coming back up? It's because you haven't processed them yet. Suppression is not an appropriate method of navigating emotion, which is why it is critical to create space for feeling them. Now, we've done episodes on this in the past. What happens when you do consistently suppress them? The short of it, death. Cancer.
We're not
cancer.
Joking. Like that's why I'm laughing.
Literally being
people
serious.
Are literally like, yeah, it's just how quick is your route to that.
Yeah. Parkinson's disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, these have all been linked back to emotional suppression, emotion dysregulation, and mental health and mental illness. And so you have to make space for them because your brain needs to encode it and store it away for you to be able to move forward. Now, the reason we don't do this is because many of us, the majority of us, to be honest, especially millennials, have grown up with parents and in environments that have said, feeling your feelings is weak. You are weak for having them. You're supposed to just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and move forward. We don't want to make space for you and your feelings. Now, why is that? There's a multitude of reasons. Amelia, I'll have you dive into that. But when we do not make space for them, they come at us over and over and over again. And when we have negative beliefs about feelings and when we're convincing ourselves that we are bad for having them, that's where we end up getting into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So before we go into the how-to, one of the things that I want to just give a quick distinguisher, because we've been using them very interchangeably, although they do have and represent a different page. The difference between emotions and feelings. One of the things that the questions that I often get in my coaching is, it's not a direct, Amelia, what's the difference between these? But it is what I find helpful for individuals because we were never really taught this stuff, right? Like, Bianca, did you ever have a class that was like, okay, kids, today we are going to learn about emotional intelligence. And one of the first things that we need to know is the difference between emotions and feelings. No, none of us got that, right? We got the ABCs or whatever we got, and that's it. So what I find when I share that micro distinction with clients, it's like, okay. So key difference between, Bianca, feel free to comment and add on. But key difference, what I found to be helpful for clients to understand so that what we share with you is actually helpful to apply is emotions are energy and motion. Yes, they're also signals, but it is far more automatic. It's those last 90 seconds and it happens involuntarily, right? And because your central nervous system is responding. So for example, fear. Fear is a really good one. We can all experience that. Fear is an automatic triggered emotion, energy and motion. Let's say, for example, you are walking down the street. All of a sudden, you see someone who is running down the street with something in their hand. You think that it's an axe. It's actually just a bat. And these kids are running down the street to go meet up with their friends who are just beyond you, but you didn't know that. Okay, what's the difference between that and a feeling? A feeling is the entire, like I like to say, cocktail of the emotion, which is fear, your physiological arousal, which is your body going into a fight mode, right? So the reorganization of blood flow. Then it's how you appraise that moment. So the thought and the interpretation that you have of, oh my goodness, that person's going to come at me or kill me or something like that. Plus the cognitive distortions that are on there or not, right? The magnifying, you're immediately going to die instead of all the other things that could be. And so all of that plus, that's the cocktail of emotions. So when we say how to create space for your feelings embody or encompass emotions. However, emotion does not inherently, when we experience it, encompass a feeling. So I just want to draw that distinction. Bianca, is there anything you would add before we get into how to?
No, that's great. Before we jump into how to, can you dive a little bit into how your negative beliefs about emotions, which end up turning into feelings, what the impact of that is?
What I believe you're asking, straight answer, is if you have a negative belief about emotions, then when emotions, quote unquote, come up or rise automatically and involuntarily in your emotional, quote unquote, experience, which then reroute your endocrine system, your blood flow, everything. If you have a belief, meaning a thought that then tries to push that away, that ends up suppressing that energy and motion. So again, same situation, for example, and you're like, emotions are bad. You then instead actually try to navigate through that situation. You might shirk it off and be like, oh, it's not a big deal because you pathologize having fear. And let's say, for example, you're a man. So men don't have fear. Men don't get scared, right? So, but what if that was a situation where this kid was coming fast and he lost his balance and you might need to step out of the way? That fear's in your body. And if you're not acknowledging that because of this belief system, emotions are bad, emotions are something that I shouldn't feel, you are literally not going to do any of what we're going to talk about. And then what that leads to is what you mentioned formerly, Bianca, which is that will lead to a higher adrenaline system, higher rate of cortisol, adrenaline, et cetera, your endocrine system getting out of whack, and you being that quote unquote wet dog that is shaking off all the muck, but you don't even realize it because you have not identified with it.
So how do we help people to start making space for them? So obviously, if we're taking apart number 1 and number 2, number 1 would be understand why they are there. So understand that they serve a purpose and that they're not this terrible thing that you just experienced because you're incompetent. Number 2 ends up being something along the lines of understanding the negative beliefs you have about them and the narratives that you have developed about them and about yourself for having them. What about along with that? What are other tools, other strategies that we can, in the next couple of minutes, give to our listeners so that they can walk away knowing, okay, I have some set tools right here, right now that I can start utilizing?
Yep. So initially, one of the things, if you take care of 1 and 2, what I would say is pace. What is your natural go-to pace? So are you constantly hammering 5 coffees a day and you literally don't take any time in your day to have a calm, quiet, grounding, anchoring moment? Okay, let's start there. I'm not going to have someone just all of a sudden continue to steamroll through their life. From a pacing standpoint, I'm going to encourage you to slow down the pace. And that might look very micro in your life. So, for example, that man, I'm thinking about him because a lot of clients of mine so happen to be male, and I have learned through their vulnerability with me, their experience. So, Amelia, what would we do after that? Okay, my pace I've learned is at like a level 9 out of 10, and it literally feels like I'm going to die if I drop down to an 8. So I'm going to ask you instead to drop down to an 8.9. And how we're going to do that, how we're going to slow down your pace is before you enter from your house to your truck, while you go through the garage, I'm going to ask you just to slow down your walking. Okay, that will literally force you to slow down your pace. And something as small as slowing down your actual foot pace will force your body through what's called a bottom-up approach of actually creating space for your feelings. Now, you're not going to be struck with immediately this giant tidal wave of all the feelings that you've been suppressing for 45 years. And that's where one of the bigger concerns is like, well, if I create space for my feelings, I'm going to be overwhelmed when they come. And that's actually terrifying. So we're going to start small with a bottom-up approach. And then third to that, what we're going to do is do what's called an indirect approach to creating space to feel your feelings. So if you're adjusting that quote unquote pacing, whether it be through your pacing, whether that be through your foot, whether that be through your breathing techniques, confronting your feelings when you haven't been doing it, and if it's not a practice for you, is very scary when you're like directly confronting it. It's like if you were to go and like talk to your partner about your inner deepest most feelings when you've never done that for 20 years. Like that is literally terrifying for your nervous system. So what I'm going to suggest is what's called an indirect approach to creating space for your feelings. What does that look like? Very similar to like when you're grown up. Let's say, for example, you're playing with some friends. Are you doing shoulder to shoulder play, or are you doing shoulder to shoulder work, or are you like literally sitting on the opposite side of the table? What I'm going to ask you to do is indirect type activities to let the feelings start to kind of come in and flow out. So what does that actually look like? For example, this can look like being at your tool bench and not having music on, right? Let's say, for example, you're in your garage and you need to fix something on your truck. Actually create a little bit of space where your tool bench, when you're working on that thing that your truck needs or whatever, don't put the music on. Keep the radio off. Put your phone away. Create a little bit of that noise cancellation so that the noise that's been happening in your head, you can start to tune up the volume little by little. So for women, like, again, it doesn't matter gender wise, but like gardening is one that I literally just did. Like that was really, really helpful, less confronting on some big feelings, right? Like there's so many different little things you can do, a hobby that allows you to indirectly create space for your feelings to kind of come up and go away, come up, go away, but go away because you're processing them. Bianca, what would you add?
That's
and
great.
How would you like to close this?
The body is one of the best ways to start introducing feeling safe enough to address feelings. So something that I'll do is I'll take a minute and I'll do deep breathing, or I will do stretching. And it just gives me a couple of minutes to like settle my body down and give me space to like just chill out for a second. Another way is journaling. I know a lot of people have kind of negative relationships with it. There's negative interpretations of it. Little girls do that. I'm not 13. Like, dear diary, today it doesn't have to be like that. It can be just jotting ideas down, jotting thoughts down, taking an inventory of where you are. So like I've had clients literally just describe the room that they're in.
Yeah.
Or like describe a scene of something that they did the other day, just to get into the habit of like going from up here in your mind to paper. And when you jot it down, it utilizes different functions and processes of your brain that help you to feel more interconnected with yourself. The more you do that, the more that you'll start being able to access these feelings and they won't be so intense.
Yeah.
Feelings are not dangerous. Unprocessed, unapproached feelings are dangerous because we don't know how to handle them. And then what you do is you end up lashing out, and that lash out is what's dangerous, not the feeling. So the more you can have emotional control, not because you're being stoic and you're not feeling anything, but because you have the control within yourself to understand the feeling, label it, navigate through it, and have effective tools and behaviors in the aftermath of it. That person is so powerful.
Facts. Yeah, truly. Okay, in closing, the only other suggestion that is obvious, and I can't believe I missed this, is go for a walk outside. Just get outside, go into nature, and just go for a minute walk. And what I would suggest is do not put your hands in your pockets. I know that sounds weird, but that's a really important distinction. Okay. With that being said, my episode suggestion, if you enjoyed this and you want a little bit more, 394, how you can leverage your rock bottom moments so that you can be even more powerful in those ways that you deeply need. Bianca.
274, what causes our emotions and how do we change them? Little throwback Thursday.
Whoa, look at us.
We hope this episode was very helpful for you. If this feels too overwhelming and you do not know how to do this on your own accord, it doesn't feel safe to do this on your own accord, please reach out. Amelia and I are both actively taking clients. There's so many ways to get involved in the Evolve community, other things that you can do that might feel less daunting.
Yeah. And as always, thank you guys. Thank you, gals. Thank you, everyone who joins us through these episodes, because your interest in the science of holistic mental health helps all of us get on this train to feel our feels. So keep evolving, everyone. We're so grateful for you. And we look forward to having you in the next episode. Bye, everybody.